to Richard away. Caught in the dive for Henson. You're kidding me.
Whose depth and resolve is being tested. Cotton drops.
Not sure what to do, so kicks it back up to the top. Shot clock at 5 for Cotton. That's ridiculous. Bryce Cotton at his very, very best.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Wildcat Wrap. It is Season 1, Episode 8. And joining me, as he does most weeks, it's a privilege to have the Basketball Fixers captain, coach, whatever you want to call him, the CEO, the COO, all those official acronyms that everyone just loves talking about. But Josh Higgins back again. How are you, mate? And welcome back to the pod.
Yeah, great, mate. I'm looking forward to obviously chatting a bit more NBL basketball and in particular Perth Wildcats basketball as well. But yes, mate, I'm back, but I will be continually doing this show for its foreseeable future. I think I can't really see myself stepping down from this one, mate. I'm really enjoying my time. And yeah, as obviously I build relationships within the Perth Wildcats organisation, hopefully this thing starts to take a leg of its own as well. So obviously they've got their own product with the Perth Wildcast. But we have a bit more of an unbiased opinion, whereas they've got to be a bit more straight down the arrow, talking good about the Perth Wildcats, but we'll tell you what it really is about. So it's a fan podcast by the fans, for the fans.
No, exactly. A terrific summary there too. And speaking of great summaries and great products out there, it's not just the Wildcat Wrap, which is obviously the number one pod by the Basketball Fix, but you've also got a number of different products that the team at the Basketball Fix are putting out, and you also have the opportunity to do one-on-one interviews. Is there anything that is either in the works, Josh, or coming out over the coming weeks too, to get not only Perth Wildcats fans, but just NBL fans excited about, of course, every and all the great work that we do at the Basketball Fix?
Yeah, there's obviously plenty going on. I think the most exciting thing is we've sort of refined our schedule a little bit. So every Monday will be a Perth Wildcats podcast and Illawarra Hawks podcast. So if you're a fan of those teams, make sure you jump on. Also, if you're a fan of the NBL in general, make sure you watch all these podcasts because they're really, really exciting. And it's not just about those in particular teams, whilst it is to a certain degree. It's still a bit of a fun, and there's a lot of NBL content on them as well. Now, Tuesdays will be the Basketball Fix Day. So our Beyond the Buzzer episodes, which is our weekly NBL talk show, which last week we had Felix von Hoff on. This week we've got Clint Berto Burtonshaw coming back for another episode from the Tasmanian Takeover. So those episodes will come out on a Tuesday with also NBL Supercoach. Wednesday, we've got the Tasmanian Takeover. We've got the Bullets podcast coming out and the Breakers podcast. And then on Thursday, we've got the Tassie Takeover podcast. And the last one's escaping me right here off the top of my head, mate. But it's been a big week for the Basketball Fix.
Is it the King's Table?
King's Table, that's right. So shout out to Salia quickly, but he's still out for a couple more weeks. SJ there from the King's Table. That's why it's escaped me, but he was involved in a pretty nasty incident as well. So he'll be back very, very shortly on the podcast. But plenty going on, mate. 8 podcasts at the moment. We'll be looking to have probably 10 to 12 once NBL 26 kicks off. So really, really exciting. We've got a few sponsors on board, which we'll start to announce over the next couple of weeks. And yeah, it's all looking up, mate. But let's get away from all the Basketball Fix stuff. Let's get back into the Wildcat Wrap.
That's it, exactly. I love it. And well, the last couple of podcasts, it's been very massive smiles, lots of great news. The Wildcats are rolling, but unfortunately, we've had a couple of results that we would like to, have again, and moments in games I'm sure we'd like to have again too. So let's rewind all the way back to Wednesday of the big game, Bryce Cotton's 250th for the Perth Wildcats too. But milestone games are not kind and friendly to the Perth Wildcats, and so I would just sort of go quickly, Josh, and then you can give us your thoughts. You were there at the game as well. So the big game was ultimately a big flop. I'm looking at it. It was only a 93-99 loss, so they only went down by 6 points. So still a pretty serviceable contest, and they fought back many times during the game, Perth as well. But it was the fourth quarter where the game was really won and lost. They just couldn't seize it. 2 of 12 from 3-point land, 8 of 24 from the field, and they only had 1 assist. So that's just not good enough if you want to be playing team basketball. There are a couple of more stats, but I sort of want to throw to you, Josh. You were there. I also got a chance to be in the press conference too, as the big wig that you are now. But why don't you give us your own little spiel on how you reckon the game unfolded in your eyes?
It was a tough one, mate, because it was a playoff atmosphere basketball game. Like, it was spoken about in the press conference afterwards. It was spoken about even with just fans that you walked past. You could just hear it. The buzz in the arena, I guess the nervous energy, 12,500 people there once again. So they've gone 13,500 for the open air game, 12,500, and I believe 13,000 again against the Cairns Taipans, or 12,000 again for the Cairns Taipans. So when you're looking at those things alone, the atmosphere, what they're starting to build again, it's all really exciting. And I don't know, like, we'll speak about a few questions later on from the fan questions and all that sort of stuff as well about, you know, John Riley and questioning his job and everything like that. But we're coming up against Melbourne United, who have been tremendous at RAC Arena. I think they've won 10 of their last 11 against the Wildcats in RAC Arena. So that far succeeds what John's done as well, when we put it into perspective. You know, like, he's still, it's something that's been built for a long time, and they've just got the blueprint to stop Bryce Cotton. Now, Bryce had a poor game, you know, 14 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. It's still not a terrible NBL game, but it's just not a Bryce Cotton game. And that's the thing that we've all been expecting for him for such a long period of time. 25 to 30 points is the benchmark, realistically, that he's set for himself. And it was really disappointing for him to see. But the real positive for this game was Christian Doolittle. You know, 33 points, the 7 rebounds, the 4 assists, and the 2 blocks. Like, when I look at a man who is just everything for a certain team, it's Christian Doolittle. So he's just so physically strong. He was pushing around Marcus Lee. He was bullying Matthew Dellavedova, bullying Chris Goulding. Anyone who was on him, he was just a bully that particular game. And, you know, obviously we'll go into the next game against Cairns, where he finally got the start. But he just does everything right for this team all the time. And he just defends so strong from 1 to 5. We saw him on Goulding at certain stages. We saw him on Marcus Lee at certain stages, on Jack White. We'll speak about Jack White very, very shortly. But it was just an all-around, I think, solid performance. And when I sat back and reflected on it a little bit with a bit of glass half full, there was a lot of positives to the Perth Wildcats. They only went down by 6 points. It was the huge fadeaway in that first 3 minutes of that last quarter that really cost them this game. But they came back and still scored 25 points in that last quarter. So they came back and scored relatively good after that first 3 minutes. You know, Delhi hit that massive 3, Goulding with that ridiculous shot as well. Marcus Lee inside was dominant. They just had that little lapse. And that's all it takes in the playoffs. That's where I think John's got to really get this team back on track again, is the fact that it's not about the full game sometimes, it's about your moments. And that's what Melbourne did. They picked their moments better. And when we speak about Melbourne quickly as well, mate, I don't want to go too deeply into Melbourne. This is the Perth Wildcats podcast, but I need to give a massive shout to Jack White. 26 points, 16 rebounds, and only 2 turnovers. And the thing that was really impressive for me was I was actually surprised when I looked at the box score after the game to see he only hit 2 of 5 3-point shots, because it felt like he shot so much more when I was watching it live. Like, this is where stats can kind of skew a little bit, because when you're watching him live, he is a dominant force. So we had no answer for him. I think it would have been nice to have Windler in the team, and he wouldn't have been able to stop Jack White, because White, when you see him in person, is an absolute monster, mate. He is huge. But what Windler can do defensively with a guy like Christian Doolittle can limit these particular guys. So I think from a Perth Wildcat standpoint and from a fan's perspective, I don't think we can be too disappointed. We've had a long stretch away from RSC Arena. We had a big win first up against Adelaide 36ers, which was a really grueling game. We backed it up a few days later against Melbourne United, which was another grueling game. And then we'll speak about the Cairns game very shortly, which was also another grueling game. So we're really starting to have these tough wins or tough losses. But I still think we're going to have the glass half full mentality. And we've got 3 games to go. If we win the next 3 games, they're going to look like geniuses again, and we'll look like genuine title contenders.
Yeah, I mean, like 3 games in 8 days, or I think that thereabouts, is really, really tricky. And, you know, coming from the 6 or 7 weeks playing away, winning 6 of 7 away, and like, as weird as it sounds, you sort of almost have to get back to used to playing at RAC Arena. And, you know, that record that Melbourne do have, Melbourne United at RAC, it's just scary. And like they have absolutely zero fears coming into the arena, especially Chris Goulding, like, just loves playing there. And, you know, they've got the formula, they've got the blueprint, as you said, to stop Bryce, you know, as good as Bryce is and has been across the whole season. Unfortunately, United, for now, they just have his number. Like, I think rebounding definitely hurt them. It hurt them back in their round 2 or their round 1 match that they had at RAC Arena. I mean, Marcus Lee just destroyed them. So, and like that, they lost the rebound count, 37-51, -9 defensive rebounds too. And like, from a when you speak about glass half full, Perth are getting enough shots up. They had +9 field goal attempts and +5 3-point attempts, but it just didn't fall their way from a shooting perspective. And unfortunately, you have those kinds of nights. So yeah, again, don't be too worried. There's still 3 winnable games absolutely on the horizon. One of them was meant to be last night, definitely winnable. That was the game that when we did the preview of it last week, it was get in, get the job done, like dangerous for sure, Cairns. And well, they turned out to be too dangerous. So let's sort of break it down a little bit quickly. It was like a curious kind of game because I think both teams severely lacked defense. There was just some insane stretches of like high octane scoring from both teams. Cairns won 3 of the 4 regular game quarters. So +4, +5, and then +9 in that 4th term, just as it seemed Perth had sort of done enough to get over the top of them. But ultimately in the second overtime, +9 to Cairns. And, we speak about the brilliant 3rd term where, Perth just piled on the pain, just like they did up in Cairns when they were away. But Josh, I think you saw bits and pieces of this game. Unfortunately, you weren't there due to a very, very busy social agenda, doing the Barstool Fix, getting all the sponsors, and having your finger on the pulse. But how is this a bit more disappointing of a loss compared to the United one?
Oh, it's definitely more of a disappointing loss, and I think it was for a couple of reasons. And I know he copped some flack, obviously, Mr. John Riley, but the biggest concern for me was the points in the paint. 50 points in the paint for the Cairns Taipans. So we only had 28, and that's not something that Dylan Windler can just fix by himself. That's not something that Ty Webster can just fix by himself. That's something that Itana Mutz needs to fix. That's something that Keanu Pinder's got to fix. That's something that Doolittle's got to be stronger in. This is where we had that hypothetical of the week last week, mate, and you said, what 3 imports would you bring in? And I said Marcus Lee. And this is the sole reason why. Okay, this is the 100% sole reason why I said we need a guy who's not worried about 20 to 25 points per game, but he's worried about stopping 25 to 30 points in the paint per game. And this is where it's a really alarming thing for me, because when we come up against solid bigs, we saw it against Melbourne United with Jack White. He was inside, he was outside, he was dominant, and that's what won them the game. You've got guys coming up, which we'll touch on very shortly with South East and Phoenix. They've got Jordan Hunter and Matt Hurt, arguably the biggest 4-5 combination and the best 4-5 combination in the NBL. Then we go and play Sydney, Xavier Cooks, Cam Oliver, a very strong 4-5 combination. And then we finish it off with Adelaide, who have got Jarrell Martin, Isaac Humphries, and Montrezl Harrell as their 3-man, big man combination. So if we don't address this issue very quickly, and it's disappointing because the praise that I gave the Perth Wildcats last episode, when we were touching on the Adelaide 36ers game, was how they limited the 3 big men to having quite poor games. And it was because they were all switched on. And again, we're going back to the press conference, and I asked John one particular question. After poor performance like this defensively, how do you get the team back on track at the training track? Because it doesn't take a lot. And he just said it's just the 1%ers. It's the little things that they're not doing on the court. They're not working for each other. They're not playing for each other. And the other thing that I want to give a quick shout out to in this game is Keanu Pinder. So 29 points, 11 rebounds, 1 assist, and 3 blocks. Why does this not happen every week? And I even asked him that particular question, and I think he was a bit taken back. And I just said to him, you can be consistent, and then there's moments where you're quite poor. And it's him going. He's just got to figure it out, because that's the form that we wanted when we signed him. We wanted this 25 and 11. We wanted this MVP play that we thought we were getting from Cairns. And for whatever reason, we haven't got him. And I know he loves playing against his former team. Every time we play Cairns, for whatever reason, he dominates. I don't know if Adam Ford just lets him dominate on the chance that, hey, mate, come back over to Cairns and come play with me. I'll make you that MVP player again. I just don't know what it is. Is there a genuine thing about that? But he was really, really good. But for a Perth Wildcats perspective, we can maybe leverage on the fact that they played 3 games in 8 days. This game went to double overtime. But then we've also got to think from a Cairns Taipans perspective. They had a 7.5-hour journey over to Perth. They had a flight delay over on Cairns. They had some problems over there as well. So that's their little run as well. They haven't had an easy run. And then they knocked off the Illawarra Hawks. I just don't know what to say about this team. It's freaky. It always happens at the end of the year. Rob Edwards was dominant. Sam Wardenberg, if we're looking for a big who can do everything, He's the guy we've got to go look after. 24 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, and 2 blocks with 2 steals. Like, that's just stuffing the stat sheet and just making everyone else look silly. But for a Perth Wildcats perspective, mate, I'm very, very disappointed. I think when we do look at this game from a glass half full perspective, again, you're no chance of a championship if you put up performances like this. And I know they're 3 and 5 game series, and you can have a poor game and still win a series, but you can't have a poor game like that and then have to switch that mentality completely and then rock up to a good team again that next day. So, yeah, I'm genuinely a bit worried now. Like, if you asked me, 2 weeks ago where I thought the Perth Wildcats were, genuine championship contenders. But now there's a chance we've gone from nearly locking in a top 2 spot to fighting in the play-in tournament and could finish as low as 5th or 6th, which is just super disappointing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I echo those sentiments exactly. Just feel disappointed that they were in a position, to be a really, really strong contender. And now they're just back in the pack with, the Sydney, Southeast Melbournes of the world, Adelaide as well to a lesser extent. So it's kind of like all that hard work they did in that 6-week stretch of away victories. It doesn't matter who you're playing, you still get the wins. And as we saw last night, every moment matters. And just if you're a couple of percentages off, as we said numerous times in different podcasts, you're going to get whacked in the face, and that's exactly and unfortunately what happened for the Perth Wildcats. KP was a brilliant story last night for him, but yeah, we just don't see it consistently enough. As you sort of described him in one of your earlier podcasts, the classic FIFO worker. He'll sort of come in for one game, play amazingly, and then he'll just go missing for the next 2. So, a guy that's on, I think, pretty decent coin, came in as a high-profile marquee Australian. I'm unsure what his contract situation is, whether it's 1 more year left or whether this is the second year. There you go. So, big decisions for Perth to make across the period of time. A lot to sort of work through and sort of work on. And just before we move on to a very exciting segment, Josh, did you want to just add anything more to that final part of it?
Yeah, I want to add something quickly with Keanu's contract, and I'm not sure what they're trying to do here. I don't know if they're trying to. It's a tough one because the fans have had their speculation. I've seen comments that, John's not going to play Keanu because he doesn't want to re-sign him next year, so he's trying to get him out of their headspace and trying to get him else somewhere. And I've also seen things of they're trying to lowball his minutes so that they can offer him less money so he will stay in the Perth Wildcats organisation for cheaper. I genuinely think the Perth Wildcats want to keep him, but it's going to be at the right money. I don't think now you can sign him to a marquee contract of, $400,000, $500,000 a year and expect to have the same Keanu Pinder. Like, he's a guy who's going to demand a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. He's going to demand a lot of money from other clubs because other clubs think they can fix him. But I think at the end of the day, though, you've got to build around Keanu. And the Perth Wildcats organisation isn't the situation where you can build around a Keanu Pinder. You're building around Bryce every single day of the week. And then if you're not building around Bryce, you're building around Christian Doolittle. And that's as simple as it is. And then if you're looking forward to the future, you're building around Ben Henschel. So, Keanu Pinder is 4 or 5 people down the pecking order, essentially, when we're looking at who would the team build upon. So, I don't know. The best situation for him, as stupid as it sounds, is going back to Cairns, because they will build around him, because they can't sign these huge stars easy. So, when they get them, they make them look like stars. That's what 40 does amazingly. He makes turds look good. He always has. Jonah Antonio, Mirso Juricic, all these guys back in the day who have not been that great, who are no longer in NBL teams because they can't find themselves in NBL teams, he makes them look good. He'll make anyone look good. He can make an average player look like a star. He can make a star look like a superstar. And that's what the biggest thing is. So if I'm Keanu Pinder, to be honest with you, mate, I'm packing my bags. I'm going back up to Cairns. I'm enjoying my basketball, maybe earning slightly a little bit less money than what I probably could get elsewhere. But then I'm the man. That's what I think he wants to be, realistically as well.
Yeah, no, I like that call. I think just, and I watch quite a bit of AFL as well, and there's always contract speculation too, and you just have to decide, is the player really worth an extra $100,000-$200,000 a season? And you can't go too hard just to retain them because you want to retain them and because you don't want to lose them. You have to know when to hold them and when to fold them, of course. But let's get to a new segment, and Chuck this one out. Josh has been just begging me for weeks. Adam, we've got to do a Who Am I? You know, we do it on the Beyond the Buzzer. It's clearly the best segment in the entire show. So, like, I gave in to Josh. But and fans, of course, as you're watching or listening to this, you know, you're going to have your own guesses. So I'll give about 4 clues. It is a Perth Wildcat. And then Josh will have 3 guesses. It was really interesting off air before we started recording. Josh was doing some very stringent research. And I don't know if I've thrown him or not. If he doesn't get it, the segment will be one and done. But let's dive in and see how he goes. So not me, but the person is, I am an American born, but was an import for the Perth Wildcats. So there you go. Just trying to get the music going. So, he also played in the NBL during the late 80s into the 90s. Now, Josh was barely born at this stage, of course, because he's only 18 years old. And he was this person. He's also an NBL MVP and NBL champion during his playing career, and also at the Olympic Games and FIBA championships. And the last clue is, I ended up becoming a dual citizen and played for Australia. So not only Josh, but our great and loyal fans of the Wildcat Rap, who am I? 3 guesses. Josh, who are you going to throw out first?
All right, mate. So I've sort of, it's a tough one because I've semi-nailed it down to 3 players. And when you go and dive in a little bit more, you know, you had James Crawford, who wasn't an NBL champion. He wasn't a NBL MVP, I should say. So that rules him out straight away. Then you've got Ricky Grace, who was an NBL champion, but he was only a grand final MVP. So I don't think that you can really say to me right now that that's him. Now you've got the old amazing Cal Bruton, who played for the Wildcats in 1987, 88, and 90. He was an NBL champion, but was not an NBL MVP. But the thing that's throwing me the most right now is I thought I nailed it. I thought it was Scott Fisher. But you've either ballsed this one up here, mate, and cooked it, or I'm just wrong. So you've said to me that it was an import. It's going to get the questions back up here. So you got American born, but an import for the Perth Wildcats. I played in the NBL during the late 80s and into the 90s. Now, Scott played in the early 80s with another NBL team. So it does work. He played for the North Melbourne Giants. So he played in the late 80s and then the early 90s. He was also an NBL champion and he was an NBL MVP. That ticks off all of that sort of stuff there. When we go a step further, he also played for the Australian national team as well, not in an Olympic sort of setting. Actually, he did. All right, I'm locking it in, mate. Is the guess Scott Fisher?
Drum roll, please. Yes, of course it's Scott Fisher.
There we are.
I only say, of course, Scott Fisher because thank you, Wikipedia. Wikipedia gave me some great clues there, so brilliant job. Shout out to Wikipedia. But I wanted to get like maybe an older player that is clearly a legend of the Perth Wildcats, you know, former coach as well. I didn't want to throw that in there because that would have been a bit of a dead giveaway to former player, former coach. There's not many of those. But yeah, you did well, Josh. Worked your way through the different parameters there, ruled out players left, right, X, Y, and Z, and you came to the correct answer in the end. So I think that the big question, the most important one, Josh, is it going to get a recall for next week?
I think it will, mate. It's a bit of a challenging one. So obviously you know all these older guys, but you don't know too much about them. Me being only 25 years of age, some of these guys retired before I was even born. So, I was looking at like Cal Bruton. I think he was done before I was born. James Crawford was done. Ricky Grace was done. All these guys were done before me. And don't get me wrong, you know all the names. You know the old school players who were foundational members of these clubs and everything like that. But I think it's a bit of fun, mate. I think we're going to bring this back for sure. I think it's a good way to get to know some of these guys and get to know some of their credentials and obviously still keep their name in the spotlight as well, mate. So I think we'll be definitely getting a run again at some sort of maybe weekly or fortnightly or monthly sort of passion as well, because I think everyone at home will be playing and they're probably screaming into their cars, their earphones as I was trying to work my way through that to pick up Scott Fisher. But great little one there for sure, mate, to kick us off.
Yeah, as you said, yeah, they're in the cars going, Josh, what are you doing? It's clearly Scott Fisher. Jeez, how do you not know that? Maybe I need to be on the Wildcat rap.
Well, that's the
All
thing.
right,
I'm more than happy. More than happy to bring some other people on as well. Have a crack. But yeah, that was a really good one, straight up, mate.
All right, let's get to hypothetical of the week. We're sort of broadening our horizons a little bit. Of course, 90% of our pod is all about the Perth Wildcats, but we're sort of going to talk a little bit of NBL. And I guess it's it's one of those hypotheticals where if you're Larry Kesselman or David Stevenson, so the owner and the CEO, for the day, and you could either bring in or take out one NBL initiative that's with pre-game, like it might be about the broadcasting, it might be something during the game or post-game, salary, anything in particular. It's so wide, like it's an absolutely huge open-ended questions, and we would love our fans as always to give us some ideas on what they would do if they were Larry Kesselman or David Stevenson. They don't have to be Larry or David. Like you can choose your own name as well if you want to. But like, what would you do to make the game more appealing or more attractive as a fan? And whilst you've got a lot of great roles within the NBL media, Josh, primarily first and foremost, you're also still a fan of the NBL too.
Oh, it's a tough one because we sort of spoke about some of this on Beyond the Buzzer. Where we could see the league growing in the next 5 years. And I could use the same one again. I think that's definitely a thing. I could definitely use one of the same ones. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if you want to hear a bit more about that, go check out the Beyond the Buzzer episode with Felix von Hoff. And my idea was an NBL Next Star draft. So go have a listen to that episode and I'll dive in more there. But one thing I'm going to say that they could bring into the NBL, and I just love to see it for so many reasons, is 2 more teams. So I think for the NBL product to continue to grow, I think it needs to bring in at least another 2 teams. Now, I don't want it to bring in another 1. Let's bring in 2. That's a nice even number, just more aesthetically to the eye when we're looking at the ladder and everything like that. But there's just such a crop of talent in the NBL that just isn't getting minutes right now. Like I looked at the Perth Wildcats, for example. Michael Harris, I think, is an underrated player. And he's not getting any minutes for the Perth Wildcats. Hiram Harris has dropped back significant minutes in the last sort of 2 months. He should be getting more minutes than any other team as well. There is a number of other players on other teams that you can look at and you can go, why is he not playing? Why are they not giving him minutes? Why is he not getting the opportunity? And it happens all across the league because the teams are so stacked now. These imports are coming over and they're not just good imports, they're great imports. We're seeing some of the greatest talent we've ever seen in the NBL. Montrezl Harrell, Kendrick Davis, Bryce Cotton, Christian Doodle, Dylan Windler, Matt Hurt, for example, Jalen Adams, Cam Oliver. We can continue going on, Milton Doyle. There is such a top-end legendary status in the NBL, but the bottom end, it's like it just drops off the face of the earth anymore, which it did about 10 years ago. So I think it's time for another 2 teams in the NBL. Where you put them, I'm not 100% sure. I think they're obviously campaigning for one on the Gold Coast already, and that's why the NBL Blitz was up there this year to see what the sort of fan engagement would be like, and it was relatively successful, and I think that'll be the first team to come in. And if I'm actually really standing from a perspective of where I'd love to see a team, I'd love to see one back in Canberra. Bring the Canberra Cannons back, get that team up and running again. Now, this may cause some controversy between the Perth Wildcats organisation and the fans as well, but I'd love to see another team in Perth. It's just like the Freo Dockers and the West Coast Eagles. You've got the established team with the West Coast Eagles, and the new team comes in. And there are a lot of people who are getting annoyed with how the club is going at the moment and all that sort of stuff. Every single time we lose, it's sack John Rillie, sack John Rillie. I don't agree with it at all, but I think it gives it another avenue for these fans to go support another team. And you can't tell me that Perth's not big enough to have 2 teams. Melbourne's got 2 teams. New South Wales has got 2 teams. It's Queensland as a state's got 2 teams. We can 100% have a second team in WA. And there would be some sort of, they might play it both at RAC Arena, or they might play one at Bendout or, Warwick, for example, where they've obviously got these new developments. So I think 2 more teams in the NBL, wherever they go, I don't really care. I just want to see some talent really getting some opportunities, because there are some incredible young Australian basketball players who are having to go elsewhere than the NBL because they just can't find spots, and they're playing over in Europe and dominating, or they're coming back and playing in NBL 1 competitions because they can't get it go. So bring 2 more NBL teams in, Larry, and let's get that one sorted straight away.
No, I love that one. And if I was to be Larry or David, that would be the big one for me. Just that they have to expand. The league is finally, after, probably 4 or 5 years, in a really great position from a financial perspective. Of course, sponsors are coming on board left, right, and center. The basketball itself is just top quality too. You spoke about the imports that are just, coming in, and they're talking about this league as well. Like, it is a massive feeder league. It's one of the best leagues to go to if you want to get back into or go to the NBA to get drafted, etc. So the reputation within the NBL around the world, it is just at an all-time high. So now's the time to strike while the iron's hot. The business is just running sensationally well. Obviously Gold Coast is notorious for having teams created, whether it's soccer or football, everywhere, and then unfortunately that they are defunct. So it may be this can be the team or this can be the time where it is successful. Canberra, I think, is a great idea too. The other one is maybe Geelong as well. I think they were the Geelong Falcons back in the day too. But then does that sort of change it up with, you've already got Melbourne, Southeast Melbourne there. Do you want a third team? And as regarding a second Perth team, yeah, it's kind of like, why not? It works in the AFL. Why can't it work in the NBL too? And if there are so many people disgruntled with John Riley and what he's doing, how he's operating, Danny Mills, then go to another team. And that's okay. Rivalry is good. Controversy creates cash. So yeah, a really, really good hypothetical. Fans, not that I'm trying to pat myself on the back there, of course, but fans, please get in your ideas on what you would do if you were Larry or David for a day. How would you change the NBL? All right, let's look into the crystal ball, talk about what's coming up. Firstly, we've got Southeast Melbourne Phoenix on Jan 31 at RAC Arena. Before a couple of days later, they travelled to Sydney for their last away game of the regular season on Feb 2 at Kudos Bank Arena. So let's do one at a time, or we can jam together, whatever works for you, Josh. Again, it doesn't get any easier. We had Melbourne a couple of nights ago, and then what's turning into a red hot Cairns, straight into Southeast Melbourne, who are rolling, and you could arguably say are almost the form team of the competition at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think they're definitely the form team of the competition when you look at it, mate. They've won 4 of their past 5 games, and they've just got so many avenues to hurt you. I think when Derek Walton Jr. went down, what was it, about a month ago now at the State Basketball Centre with a hamstring injury, people were like, nah, that's them done. They're going to fall off the face of the earth, and it just looks like they've got going again. And I never thought I'd say this about Nathan Sobey, because I've been such a big Nathan Sobey hater, and if you follow the basketball fiction, you have for some time, you'd understand that. But I just couldn't stand this bloke, because I don't think he's a winner. And I just think he's a guy who's happy getting his 22 to 25 per game and doesn't care about winning an NBL championship. But that's all changed for me this year. I think he's a guy who is genuinely worried about winning a championship. And you see his combination with a Matt Hurt and a Jordan Hunter has really, really helped this team propel themselves into a top contender in the NBL. So when you look at a few of their statistics, this is where the game is going to be won or lost. So you've got the Perth Wildcats, who are allowing 96.6 points per game, which is 9th in the NBL. That's just, it's horrible when you look at it. I think Brisbane's only worse, and they're a team that's floating down the bottom ladder. So, you've got them, and then you've got for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, they're only giving up 90 points per game. So you've got a really good defensive team with a pretty poor defensive team. Now, obviously, where they both sort of match each other as the offensive end. So the Perth Wildcats are averaging an astounding 99.5 points per game, and the Phoenix are averaging 95.8 points per game. But I get more worried about the defensive end, because I would, as a fan right now, would be relying more on the Southeast Melbourne defense than the Perth Wildcats defense. And that's where I'm a bit worried. So I'm genuinely scared for this game. The Wildcats, 3 of their last 5. The Phoenix, 4 of their last 5. It doesn't look that bad on paper. But the Wildcats coming with 2 poor losses against Melbourne and Cairns, which we touched on. And I really think that the problem is going to be Matt Hurt and Jordan Hunter for this particular game, mate. They'll get going inside. We will have no resistance, I don't think. And I think the Phoenix will actually walk away the winners in this particular game. And the Wildcats will be 3 losses on a row. And, their season, it's looking really, really worrying now going forward.
Yeah, it's so intriguing. Like this is almost the big one. Like, well, we wanted to say that the Melbourne United game was like just a mouth-watering contest, but given the fact they've lost their last two, like they just can't afford to go on a slide. And I believe that David Aquera and Ethan Amunta were given a bit of a roast pre-Cairns game. Like it didn't turn into a massive performance. So as you sort of identified, those guys they've got to step up massively. Christian too. Hopefully Dylan can come back, but even if they don't, they've just got to show a little bit more like dedication, desperation on those rebounds. They've got to block up that paint. So many game analysis, it's been points in the paint has been the difference in the match. So that's where it's got to be won and lost. And it doesn't get any easier when we look 2 days later against Sydney. And you sort of spoke about it earlier on too. Cam Oliver, Xavier Cooks, two of the best 4-5s in the game as well.
Yeah, definitely, mate. It's obviously another one of those games where you look at, what you're coming up against and you sort of get a little bit worried. And I think the other player we've got to throw into that mix as well, obviously the big men have been such a massive question because of how poor we have been, defending points in the paint. But Jalen Adams has been on a bit of a tear recently, 24 points to halftime last week in their particular game. And it's just been dominant. And this team worries me slightly when you're going into the playoffs. And I've still got major questions about both of these teams. And I still think I've got more questions about the Sydney Kings than I do the Perth Wildcats, because the Sydney Kings have shown that they can't really score with the top teams in the NBL, but they can sort of hold you around that sort of mark where they can sort of just beat you. And realistically, 2 weeks ago, they should have lost that game. I think it was against the New Zealand Breakers, but actually won the game by 12 points. But if they played against any other team, they would have lost. Like, that is just a genuine statement right there. They would have lost that game by about 10 to 15 points. So it really does depend on what Sydney Kings outfit rocks up against the Perth Wildcats. And I think this is a bit of a danger game for the Sydney Kings, more than I do for the Perth Wildcats. Because, God forbid, let's just say, for whatever reason, the Perth Wildcats lose to South East Melbourne Phoenix, they are going to be fired up knowing this is a game not to just get for top two. Top two will be out of the picture by that point. It'll be a game to keep them in the playoffs. Like, this is, I don't know, I don't think they can actually slide all the way out of the 6, but it could be the difference between, going from 4 with a direct chance of going straight into the playoffs, or going from 5 to 6 where you're pretty much fighting for your life for every single game on. So I'm worried for this game. I think it's going to be an interesting game. I believe Dylan Windler will be back for this one. I think he's pretty close for the Phoenix game. So that's a massive in for the Perth Wildcats. Like, those two guys, when you got Christian Doodle and Dylan Windler at their full peaks, their power, they are really, really good players, the Perth Wildcats. And they can slow down Xavier Cooks. They can slow down Cam Oliver. They can slow down these other guys like that. So, I don't know. I'm going to go on a bit of a limb here, mate. I know it's probably weird to say that the away game, out of all these games, we're going to win. But I'm going to lock it in, mate. I think we'll win the away game. We're going to limit Jalen Adams and just really make him... I think we're going to make him more of a scorer than a playmaker. Like, he had 24 points and 9 assists in that game a couple of weeks ago. And he's just been doing that relatively consistently. So I'm happy with him having 20, but I want him to have 2 assists, because he gets everyone else going, and that's the problem for the Perth Wildcats. And also one guy we've got to really shut down as well. Massive shout out to this man, Kawat. I know a lot of people aren't his biggest fan, but he's been an absolute heater, and we have really got to stop him from having one of those Kawat games that he's been having, because I think he's got one hand solely on the 6th Man of the Year trophy, and we've got to not allow him to put that second hand on there just yet. But massive game, mate. I'm going to go the Perth Wildcats by 5 points.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty fair summary, as it normally is from you as well. And yeah, that's the one they can definitely pinch, I reckon. Yeah, Southeast Melbourne is going to be quite tricky. They're just rolling at the moment, and Bryce seems to play well at Kudos Bank Arena too, one of those venues, the away venues that he doesn't mind playing at. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm mindful of time and also battery percentage too. So let's roll into a couple of fan questions. So I'm going to ask this one to you, Josh, and you sort of touched on it in a couple of aspects, I guess, across the podcast. So, everyone's pretty upset come the end of the game, with Cairns and Melbourne United, and I guess you've got to point your finger at the head coach. So Tristan Bruin asks, this team is stacked, so why did the new owner hire such a crap coach? And piggybacking off that was Ashley Sultana, who commented, why did the owner just most award, and idiot coach who has no idea of defense a 3-year extension. And lastly, Sean Martin says, what's the cost to terminate Riley's contract? So just a couple of quick points on that. I know you're quite firm on it's not really John Riley's massive reason, as to why they lost by 6 and lost by 9 last night.
Yeah, well, I'm a massive fan of when the team's going great, it's never the coach, it's always the players. And when the team's going poor, the first finger is pointed at the coach. And, I've never really been a massive let's just sack a coach and move on, because you've got to go and restart. Go and tell me in the NBL, for example, where we're going to find another coach for. Let's just talk NBL, for example. Who are you going to go and pick up? Are you going to bring one of these assistants on to full time? I don't think so just yet. They're all relatively young and probably not ready just yet. Can you go out there and drag a Dean Vickerman out of Melbourne United? No. So look at the coaches who may be better than what John Riley is consistently. So Dean Vickerman, not a chance. I think Josh King won't leave South East Wellington Phoenix, but he hasn't proved himself just yet. Brian Gorge, I think's past it. And, no one's talking about sacking that bloke, but he's past it 100%. You've got some really quality coaches in the NBL, but not all of them are doing great. And that's the thing. I think John, and where you've got to look at from the start of the season, where they were 2-5 to start the year, as little as 2 weeks ago, they were a top 2 contender in the NBL. They've had 2 poor games. And once again, what really pisses me off is everyone just calls for his job straight away. Now, I've done coaching at a much lesser level, and it's just so common. When your team is winning and the team's flying, the players are great. They don't see all the hard work that the coaches are doing behind the scenes to get those players to play good, to get them all in. They don't see what's going on. They don't see the little psychological, challenges they do with these players to get something ticking in their mind to play as a team. Now, they've had 2 poor games. Yes, granted. I think they've only had 1 poor game. The Melbourne United game wasn't bad at all. So let's not think about sacking John Riley. He's here for 3 years. Let's back him in. Mark's a massive fan of him. Danny Mills is a massive fan of him. And if I'm going to trust anyone in the NBL, it's Danny Mills. That bloke has proven time after time after time again, he can pick talent. He's picked some of the most incredible imports that we've ever seen in the Perth Wildcats colours, and I'm a massive fan of what he does. So I'm sorry about disrespect for anyone who's asked those questions. I just think we've got to hold the sort of horses a little bit, because I think at the end of the day, if we win an NBL championship, I'll be calling out Tristan, I'll be calling out Ashley, and I'll be calling out Sean to say, where are you now? Where are you now? Because I don't think it's championship or bust right now. I know we think that's what it is. I still think if we make the playoffs and maybe make the NBL finals, that's somewhat of a success, I think. So, I still think we've got a long way to go. We've still got 3 games regular season. We've still got the playoffs. Hold your horses a little bit, Adam. But I've got a question for you here, mate. Mendoza's son commented, just quickly listen to the press conference. Pinder didn't sound happy. He ain't going to stick around. Surely the management is taking notes and listening to fans. And also, James Unfunso added, none of the players ever look happy to be there with JR compared to the love that exists between players and coaches in Illawarra, Tasmania, Cairns, and Phoenix. I've got a little thing for this after you answer, mate, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of not so much in the the inner sanctum or even the outer sanctum, I guess, as you see it a lot more than what I do, Josh. And you were at that press conference the other night, so you can probably just give us a really good finger on the pulse there. In saying that, players are never going to be walking in with sort of sunshine and massive smiles when they lose a game. They're not going to go, "Hi everyone, I'm so keen and happy to answer all your questions about how we just got our pants handed to us by Cairns Taipans who are sitting second last on the ladder," or whatever they are. So they're never really going to be, and most players aren't even incredibly, they don't put a lot of personality out there, because most of the time when they put personality out there, someone picks it up and gets written into an article, and then that's why they just don't really want to make comments anymore. So that's why we get the I'm just going to listen to the coach. We're just going to take it 1 week at a time, and it's all the boring answers, because unfortunately, just where we are as a society at the moment, players are not prepared to give a bit more personality, because unfortunately, some individuals just turn it back on them. So from a happiness perspective, I'm sure behind the closed doors, I'm sure they love John Riley, but you're not going to be walking in, up and about when you lose a game. So I'll let you finish off that question there, Josh.
Yeah, well, knowing some of these guys from afar, like Christian, for example, we've had him on the show before, and I've obviously spoken to him off air and also some of the Wildcats games. he's just a genuine winner. And the guy is a very quiet guy naturally. So he will tell you first and foremost, if they lose a game, the last thing he wants to do is talk to anybody. He just wants to go home, get back in, have a shower, have a sleep, and then move on to the next day, and hopefully get a win there in that next game there as well. Now, Keanu, for example, I actually approached him a couple of weeks ago about coming on the podcast. He's like, man, I'm sorry, I don't do media. I don't really do anything. These guys, it's not like they want to be there. It's not like they hate John Rillie. It's not like they hate the Perth Wildcats. We've just got different guys over here who are just genuine winners. We haven't got guys who are quirky like Tyler Harvey. You know, like even the guys with Scott Roth, I think half the time they just sit there and put a smile on their face. Like Milton Doyle is exactly like Christian Doolittle. You know, he just sits there with you know, like that sort of stoic face and doesn't really care about anything and just wants to move on and get out of the sort of press conference. Every player does. So I just think it's the fact that John is very straight down the arrow. He's very serious. He's very precise with his answers, and he knows what he wants to say, and then he gets out of there because he doesn't want to let things again leak to the press and all that sort of stuff. But you know, I think at the same time, it's definitely an interesting one because we do see happy players and happy coaches. But at the end of the day, though, we want to strive for success. So I think you can't be too happy and too, you know, like you were saying, glitz and glamour and all that sort of stuff as well, mate. But yeah, good questions, obviously, from everyone. I'm sorry we haven't, I guess, agreed with all the perspectives that you guys have. But I think one thing I wanted to quickly throw out there, mate, is if you guys want to jump on these shows, for example, we're more than happy to have another person on here and talk some more perspectives of the Perth Wildcats with some of you fans and really try to break down why you want to sack John Rillie. It's easy to say you want to sack John Rillie, for example, but tell me what you would do afterwards, or tell me what they can do better, or tell me what they can do. You know, so that's the most important thing going forward. But yes, that will wrap up the end of the Wildcat wrap. I think Batty, as you can see, has just unfortunately left us. He's had a few technical difficulties here. So just me by myself. I'm under Adam Batt's name. I am not Adam Batt, just so you guys are all aware. But that will wrap up today's episode of the Wildcat wrap. It's been a really, really good episode. And once again, thank you for sending in all your answers and all your questions as well. If you want to get involved with the Wildcat wrap going forward, make sure you comment on all the stuff in the Cat Chat, the Perth Wildcat supporters group page, and everything as well that we post around the page as well. Or you can reach out to us at thebasketballfix.com or the Basketball Fix on Twitter and Instagram as well. There's plenty of things going on at the Basketball Fix. If you want to check everything out, make sure you check the links in the description below. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you comment as well. Get involved with the Wildcat wrap. This is a podcast about the fans, for the fans, and by fans as well. So we are looking forward to obviously continuing on this journey with everyone and every single one of you guys. And we're looking forward to continuing on the rest of the NBL season. But until next time, that has been the Wildcat wrap. I have been Josh Higgins, and I hope you've gotten your basketball fix.
Did enough to wrench it away. Crossing the dive for Hensel. You're kidding me.
Whose depth and resolve has been tested. Cotton drops.
Not sure what to do, so kicks it back up to the top. Shot clock at 5 for Cotton. That's ridiculous. Bryce Cotton